In the spring of 2022, 24 people showed up at Stanford University to take part in a study. They weren't random volunteers. They were 22 pairs of identical twins. For 8 weeks, one twin from each pair ate a healthy vegan diet with no meat, eggs, or dairy. The other twin ate a healthy diet that included meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. Both diets were built the same way otherwise, full of vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, with almost no added sugar or processed food. The reason researchers use twins instead of random strangers comes down to one simple fact. Identical twins mostly share the same DNA. They usually grow up in the same house, eating the same meals, with the same habits passed down by the same parents, for the most part. That means if one twin's body changes and the other twin's doesn't, the difference almost certainly comes from the diet itself, not from genetics or upbringing. It's one of the cleanest ways scientists have to test whether food really changes the body, separate from all other factors that usually get in the way. After 8 weeks, the results were measured and compared, twin against twin. On average, the twin eating the vegan diet lost about 4 more pounds than their sibling. Their LDL cholesterol, the kind doctors call bad cholesterol, dropped by around 15 points. Their fasting insulin levels, a marker of how well the body handles sugar, improved by about 20%. Every one of those numbers came from comparing a person directly against their own genetic twin, eating the exact same amount of effort in following a diet, just a different one. The study wasn't as simple as one diet winning and the other losing. Researchers noticed that the twins on the vegan diet were eating, without being told to, about 200 fewer calories a day than their omnivore siblings. Some of the improvement could be tied to that gap alone, not just to what kind of food was on the plate. Scientists who reviewed the study afterward pointed this out as a real limitation, one the original research team acknowledged as well. There was another number that told a more complicated story. The twins on the vegan diet saw their vitamin B12 levels drop by about 65% over the 8 weeks. B12 mostly comes from animal products, and the vegan twins weren't taking a supplement to replace it. Long-term B12 deficiency is linked to nerve problems and mood changes, though 8 weeks isn't long enough to know how serious that risk becomes over time. The same diet that improved cholesterol and insulin numbers was also quietly draining a nutrient the body needs from somewhere else. The study was published in the science journal JAMA Network Open in November 30th, 2023, led by a Stanford professor named Christopher Gardner. The participants came from something called the Stanford Twin Registry, a list of twins who agree ahead of time to take part in research like this. It's one of very few tools scientists have to study nutrition this precisely, because most diet studies rely on people simply reporting what they ate, which is a method known to be very unreliable. Using twins this way isn't a new idea. Scientists have been doing it for decades to answer a much older question. How much of who we are comes from genes, and how much comes from everything that happens to us after we're born? One of the most famous examples is the Minnesota study of twins reared apart, which ran from 1979 to 1999, and tracked more than 100 pairs of identical twins who had been separated early in life and raised in different households. That study found that intelligence measured by IQ tests was heavily influenced by genetics, with researchers estimating that genes accounted for around 70% of the differences between people. The Stanford diet study works on the same basic logic, just aimed at a much narrower question. Instead of asking what makes someone smart, it asks what happens inside a body over 8 weeks, depending on what goes into it, with genetics held as close to constant as science allows. The study became well known outside of scientific circles too. It became the basis for a Netflix documentary series called You Are What You Eat, a Twin Experiment, which followed 4 of the twin pairs from the study and turned a set of cholesterol numbers into something as much wider audience would actually watch. The Stanford study didn't stop at cholesterol and weight. A second research team working with a lab called True Diagnostic took blood samples from the same twins and measured something called DNA methylation, I think is how you say it, a chemical marker on DNA that scientists use to estimate how old a body is on a cellular level. separate from how many birthdays a person has actually had. That second study, published in 2024, so a lot more recent, found that the twins on the vegan diet showed a small drop in their estimated biological age, about 0.6 of a year on average, while their omnivore siblings didn't show the same change. The drop showed up specifically in markers tied to the heart, liver, and inflammation. The researchers who ran that follow-up were careful about what the finding actually meant. One of the study's co-authors, Lucia Aronica of Stanford, said clearly that a vegan diet without the right supplements carries its own risk to the same epigenetic processes being measured, echoing the same B12 problem from the first study. Another researcher on the project pointed out that the biological age could drop partly be explained by the same lower calorie intake and the higher fiber content seen earlier, not by some unique property of avoiding animal products. Even the scientists who found the effect were the ones drawing the line around how much weight it should be given. And I should probably point out that just because you're losing weight doesn't mean that's a healthy thing. Maybe you are already a healthy weight, and you didn't need to be eating fewer calories and dropping weight like that. And Pam and Wendy, two of the twins from the study, grew up in South Africa eating meat every day. Years after the study ended, they described their eating now as not fully plant-based, but far from what it used to be. They've cut their meat intake by about half. Cheese has gone from a daily habit to an occasional treat, and the catering business they run together now leans harder on plant-based dishes than it did before the study. Neither twin went back to exactly how they ate before. Neither one went fully vegan either. Two people who started the study with identical DNA ended up years later still eating just differently enough to tell them apart at the dinner table. And honestly, just because you're eating vegan does not mean you're healthy. There's tons of examples out there. Like a lot of people are pointing to Ariana Grande right now. She's rather thin and she is on a vegan diet. And it could be pointed to the lack of being able to get protein in your diet. Like it's harder to get it in when you're vegan, as well as the correct calorie intake, just because if everything you eat is so low in calories, it would be very difficult to, hit maintenance, let alone try and put on weight with that kind of thing. And then it also talks about, obviously, these studies were food involving not processed foods, but a lot of vegans tend to eat like Oreos and stuff like that because they still, fall within what they're allowed to eat when they go vegan. So it really is a weird balance you have to strike, and I'm not personally someone who loves the vegan diet, so I have tried it, but it would be really interesting to see twins or triplets or somebody do a similar test to this for 8 weeks and test things like the carnivore diet and paleo and still involving meat in a more balanced way rather than an all or nothing type of diet mindset. But anyway, that was just my thoughts. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.